Hi everyone, welcome to the screencast on political power and territoriality for AP Human Geography. Today we're diving into the ways humans organize space, claim territory, and exert control over land, people, and resources. These ideas are central to understanding how political boundaries are established and maintained, and how they influence everything from government systems to cultural identity. We'll explore key concepts like territoriality, which deals with the control and influence over a specific geographic space, and political power, which extends beyond physical borders to include influence over people and resources. We'll also examine how these ideas intersect with sovereignty, economics, defense, and even conflict. By the end of this screencast, you'll have a clearer picture of how these concepts shape the world map and the relationships between states. Let's start by breaking down the specific objective for this topic. You'll need to be able to describe the concepts of political power and territoriality as used by geographers. So what does that mean? Let's start with political power. This is essentially about how control is exerted over people, land, and resources, and this control can be expressed geographically. Geographers look at political power through examples like neocolonialism, shatterbelts, and choke points. Now let's move on to territoriality, which is all about the connection between people, their culture, and their economic systems to the land they occupy. Territoriality helps explain why humans feel such strong attachment to certain places. It can manifest through things like boundaries, cultural landscapes, or even conflicts over land use. Geographers study territoriality to understand how these connections shape human behavior and interactions on the land. By the end of this topic, you should be able to not just define political power and territoriality, but also give examples of how they're expressed geographically. We'll dive deeper into these concepts throughout this screencast. Territoriality refers to the control and influence exerted over a specific geographic space. It involves various interconnected aspects that shape the identity and function of a territory. Historic and cultural links often define territoriality, as shared traditions, language, and religion can create a sense of belonging and connection to a particular area. Governments also play a critical role, establishing systems of authority to manage and organize the space. Significant factor, as the availability of resources and trade opportunities within a territory often determines its value and the level of control exerted over it. Boundaries are essential components of territoriality, marking the physical limits of control and often symbolizing the identity of those who inhabit the space. Sovereignty, or the ability of a state to govern itself without outside interference, further underscores territorial control, while defense and military capabilities are often employed to protect or expand territorial claims. However, territoriality can sometimes lead to conflict, especially when multiple groups or states claim the same space or when resources within a territory are contested. Political power, while related to territoriality, is not confined to a specific geographic space with defined boundaries. It is the ability to control people, land, and resources, often extending beyond the limits of territorial boundaries. Political power can be exerted through various means, including diplomacy, economic influence, and military strength, and does not always align neatly with physical borders. This flexibility allows political power to be wielded in ways that transcend geographic constraints, impacting global relationships and the balance of power between states or organizations. Together, territoriality and political power shape the ways humans organize, control, and interact with the world around them. Political power and territoriality can be expressed in various ways, often reflecting unequal relationships between nations or regions. One key example is neocolonialism, which involves using economic, political, cultural, or other pressures to influence or control other countries, often without direct territorial occupation. Unlike traditional colonialism, where nations established formal control over foreign territories, Neocolonialism relies on more subtle methods to achieve dominance. A clear illustration of neocolonialism can be seen in the relationships between semi-periphery and periphery countries, terms used to describe nations that are economically dependent on more developed core countries. Many former African colonies, for example, remain reliant on outside investments for their economic security, creating a form of modern dependence. Take Kenya as an example. The country built a $3.8 billion railroad financed and constructed by a Chinese government-owned company. While this infrastructure project was meant to boost Kenya's economy, the massive debt incurred has left the nation vulnerable to foreign influence. Reports suggest that if Kenya defaults on its loans, China could take control of the railroad, highlighting how economic investment can translate into political and territorial power. Another way political power is expressed is through military influence, often tied to territorial goals. The United States' wars in the Middle East provide an example of how political power is projected beyond a country's borders. These conflicts have been driven by efforts to secure strategic resources, maintain regional influence, and counter rival powers. The military presence in this region underscores how political power can be expressed over land and resources far from a nation's own territory. Together, examples like these show how political power and territoriality are not limited to traditional borders or physical boundaries, but are often expressed through economic and political dominance that can reshape relationships between nations. Another way political power and territoriality are expressed is through shatter belts, which are regions of instability located between states or powers with overlapping territorial and political interests. These areas often experience tension and conflict because of their strategic locations and the competing interests of larger, more powerful states. A key historical example of a shatter belt is Germany during the Cold War. Geographically positioned between the democratic nations of Western Europe, backed by the United States, and the communist states of Eastern Europe, led by the Soviet Union, Germany became a focal point of geopolitical tension. The division of Germany into East and West, symbolized by the Berlin Wall, demonstrated how territoriality and political power clashed within a single nation. Germany's location made it a battleground for ideological, political, and military competition between global powers. Another notable shatter belt is the Balkan Peninsula, particularly the region of the former Yugoslavia. This area's history as a part of larger empires, such as the Ottoman Empire and later the Iron Curtain under the Soviet influence, has contributed to its instability. The Balkans are home to a wide variety of ethnicities, religions, and languages, which have often acted as centrifugal forces, pulling the region apart rather than uniting it. This diversity, combined with its strategic relative location between Europe and Asia, has made the Balkans a hotspot for conflict and territorial disputes throughout history. These examples highlight how the concept of shatter belts reveals the complex interactions between geography, politics, and cultural diversity. They also show how territoriality and political power are not just about control over land, but also about managing competing interests and cultural differences in key regions around the world. Another way political power and territoriality are expressed is through choke points. Narrow waterways, straits, or canals that are strategically important for global trade and transportation. These locations are often difficult to navigate, and because they serve as critical passageways for shipping, they are hotspots for competition and control. Choke points demonstrate how geography can directly influence political and economic power. A key characteristic of choke points is that they can be closed or blocked to disrupt sea traffic, giving nations that control these areas a powerful strategic advantage. By controlling a choke point, a country can assert its territoriality and political power by limiting or influencing the flow of goods. This is especially significant for resources like oil, food, and consumer products, which are vital for economies worldwide. Some of the most important choke points include the Strait of Malacca, located between Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, which connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. It's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, crucial for global trade. The Strait of Hormuz, near Iran, is a vital route for the transportation of oil from the Middle East. Any disruption here could significantly impact global energy markets. The Suez Canal in Egypt, which links the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, is essential for reducing shipping times between Europe and Asia. The canal's importance was highlighted in 2021 when a temporary blockage caused massive disruptions to global trade. These choke points illustrate how geography and territorial control can amplify a nation's influence on global trade and politics. Their strategic value often makes them focal points for international disputes and showcases the critical role of physical geography in shaping political power.